Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. How is the Seattle City Council approaching the fall budget with a COVID pandemic that's not going away? What changes to zoning laws are coming to your neighborhood? And what impact will another extension of the eviction moratorium have on Seattle renters and landlords? Tammy Morales, the chair of the Council's Economic Development Committee, joins me to answer these questions and the ones you're sending in too, next on Council Edition.
The reason this is so important is because it really is an opportunity for us to look at the deep structural racism that is embedded in the land use code.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. And here we are with Councilmember Tammy Morales from District 2. We really appreciate you being with us at such a busy time. The mayor just about to lay out her budget proposal for the fall. So let me ask you a quick question about that. Looking ahead, just touching on your top budget priorities and also your overall approach when it comes to spending. You mentioned at a council meeting recently, we're likely going to be dealing with COVID for the next few years. Does that mean we're still in emergency mode when it comes to the city budget, or how are you looking at this?
Hi, Brian. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on. I think for me, the priorities really are around building community wealth. And I think it does sort of tie in with the things that we need to do related to COVID. Just in terms of COVID itself, I think we do still have some short-term needs. Our neighbors still need support with food security, with rental assistance. We have a lot of community-based organizations and small businesses who are still worried about getting pushed out. And so we still have those kind of immediate needs that we will probably have for the next year or so. And so that is going to be part of the budget conversation. Yeah. And then longer term, I think this is an opportunity for us to really think about how we build back better. We're hearing a lot of folks talk about that. And for me, COVID really brought, for all of us, COVID really brought into relief how disparately some neighbors are impacted by the disparities in the city. And so I think this is really a chance for us to confront those racial disparities that existed before COVID. And really be intentional about working to address them and working to repair that harm. So, that's going to be sort of front and center in terms of the budget. But I do have sort of bigger priorities that I'm also looking at kind of longer term.
Let's talk about those and maybe some of the things you've heard from some constituents about building ahead towards the future here, building back better and building ahead in the few years upcoming here.
Sure. So we're really thinking from our office about three sort of buckets of work. One is around anti-displacement and kind of community wealth building. So it's really important that our residents and our organizations and small businesses are getting the support they need to be able to stay in the city. Displacement continues to be an issue. So we're really looking at a land acquisition fund. Starting to think about how we help neighbors stay in the city so that we maintain some community cohesion. We have the Equitable Development Initiative, we have a strategic investment fund. There are different pots of money in the city that have the intention of figuring out how to help folks stay. And one of the things we'll be looking at is how do we really streamline those different initiatives and pots of money so that we can be very strategic in how we help folks acquire land, acquire property, and support kind of the goal that I have around community ownership so that folks don't get pushed out.
Building generational wealth. Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Yeah. And then so tied to that is also an equitable economy. In my office, we're especially interested in how we can support young people. So last year, for example, we worked pretty closely with the Port of Seattle to expand their youth opportunity initiative, creating apprenticeship programs for young people. So we want to be looking at how we can expand those kinds of programs, especially for young people who, for whom college may not be the path that they're going, so that they can support themselves, support their families. I also sit on the Puget Sound Regional Council's Economic Development District.
Right.
And one of the things we learned there is that the recovery effort is really going to have to, in order to have an acute impact, the work that we do needs to focus on Black women, Black entrepreneurs, Black owned businesses, because those are the folks who can benefit the most from like deep investment. And so we're looking at business accelerator models that can provide technical assistance to those folks so that we can really, move the dial on their wealth and well-being and on the recovery itself.
Got it.
And then the last thing I'll say about budget is, I represent a district that has been historically under-resourced. And so our real focus for the district is going to be on infrastructure. Sidewalks, we need sidewalks. We need protected bike lanes, parks and trails. I really want to look at Vision Zero and safe routes to school so that our children have safer ways to get around, and others in the neighborhoods have safer ways to get around.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that. And just a heads up, folks, the council is holding its first public hearing on the budget October 12th at 5:30. Catch it right here on the Seattle channel. Make sure you interact with your council members on that. Councilmember Morales, I did want to touch on one budget area, seeing a lot of scrutiny from the council right now, the Seattle Police Department budget. The council's in this process of reimagining public safety. Some of the money that used to be going to the SPD, now going towards more community-based solutions. So there are some good things about that. There's some concerns about that too, because we've seen record levels of officers leaving the department over the last 18 months. Many say in exit interviews they don't feel supported by the council. So I've asked a few council members this, and the mayoral candidates too. How do you balance the cost of retaining and recruiting the police officers that Seattle needs with the need for public safety solutions? It's not easy.
Well, I will say, speaking for myself, there are different opinions on the council. My concern really is about shifting away from the department, the responsibilities and the, kind of the things that are outside of their purview, that they aren't trained for, that they aren't experts in. And we've had a lot of conversation already about what those might be, and shifting away the resources that go along with that as well. But I'm really focused on upstream solutions. I do think that a lot of the investment that we need to make in the city needs to be on more preventive measures, on things that can help support, community members who have been marginalized. And so I think we need to invest, if we're talking about young people, for example, in restorative healing programs, in violence interruption, violence prevention. If we're talking about our homeless neighbors, I think the same goes there as well. We won't have the outcomes that we're looking for in terms of community safety until we invest in greater street outreach, better housing, housing for low-income folks, and the kind of mental health support services that these populations need. And so, I think that in order to have the kind of outcomes that we are talking about as a city, it really means investing in more upstream solutions so that our neighbors know that we want them to be successful and that we're investing in a way that will make that happen.
Fair enough. I know there are a lot of concerns about this that'll be aired during the budget hearings over the next couple of weeks here. So thank you for that. I did want to follow up on an issue that you spent a lot of time on over the past year and a half, the participatory budget process. Didn't go exactly as you wanted it to, I would say, last year with the Black Brilliance Research Project. I know there's still some money out there. I'm trying to figure out what's next with this. Is this something you're going to try to bring back this fall? Is this something you want to see going forward? Let's talk about participatory budgeting, please.
Yeah, well, thanks. The money's still there. I'm really excited about where we are with that, actually, because later this year, the Office of Civil Rights is the city department that is implementing that.
Yes.
So they will be hiring a contractor to facilitate that process in 2022. And the money is still there for that. Right now they're staffing up. So this fall, they will be collaborating with community to develop the RFP for that contractor that will be hired. So that process continues, but through the summer and early part of the fall, they will be recruiting and hiring staff.
Okay.
And then I think the plan is that by the end of the year, once they've onboarded people, they will be putting that RFP out so that we have a contractor who is in place, and the actual process will begin next year. I think there's something like $21 million left for that, and and it is my expectation and my intention that this becomes a regular way that we do budgeting, that some portion of our investments are made by community. One of the things I talk about a lot as a principal in our office is democratizing access to power and resources. And the participatory budgeting process is a great example of what I mean by that. Really giving our neighbors a chance to weigh in and have a direct impact on the kinds of things they want to see.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens in the months ahead on that. I wanted to tackle some recent work the council has been doing when it comes to helping out renters. I know you work on this committee as well. The council is working on legislation to require 180 days notice to go to tenants when there are rent increases involved, and also an ordinance to help tenants with the cost of relocation if their rent goes up 10% or more. A few questions have come in to me about this on social media. One self-described mom and pop small landlord says this: "We've never seen such loss of affordable community-based rentals. Many people selling or repurposing property because of spiking risk and quick changing regulations. Why isn't council tracking or mitigating this phenomenon?" Another person writes, "Rents in Seattle have risen more than 25% this year alone. These are unconscionable and show why we need rent control." So some different ends of the spectrum there, to be sure. But what's your message to renters and landlords when it comes to this new legislation?
Well, we all know how unaffordable Seattle is. We all know that it is very difficult to pay the rent. Lots of folks are doubling up. People are having to live 2 or 3 separate individuals in an apartment just to be able to afford the rent. And of course, right now we also have the pandemic crisis that has led to many people being at risk for eviction. My priority is really in making sure that people don't get evicted, because that will only contribute to the challenge we're having with our homelessness issues. What I will say about that is that right now, every government, the mayor did just extend the eviction moratorium until mid-January. And every government is struggling right now. Every jurisdiction in the country is struggling with getting rental assistance out the door. The feds have provided millions, $100 million, I think, for this area. The county is doing that. The city has done it. And I will say that, my constituents and I are really frustrated that the state and the county have failed the 60,000 people who are at risk of getting evicted. The county's only released about almost $11 million of the $145 million in rental assistance. So that money is there. We need to figure out how we're going to get that into the hands of tenants, into the hands of landlords, so that people are not at risk of losing their housing or losing, their property. I think it's important that the county and the state get that money out the door as fast as possible.
And I was going to say, and I know at the federal level, President Biden is talking about loosening some of the restrictions from the U.S. Treasury such that money goes out more quickly. But is there anything your office can do? I've heard this frustration from so many people at the city level. The county and the state need to get going here. Is there anything the city can do with this?
Well, we don't have the money. The money is coming through the county, right? I mean, there is some assistance that we are providing. But, it really is an issue of bureaucracy and, not having had systems set up to get this much money out the door so quickly. And so it is frustrating. And I do think that the county needs to find some workarounds so that they can streamline this and do a much faster job of getting that money out.
Okay, well, here's hoping, definitely. I wanted to talk about another issue. You recently had a meeting with the Beacon Hill Council talking about anti-displacement, anti-gentrification efforts in your district and citywide too. I wanted to talk about this because the council recently passed a measure to change the label of single-family zoning. Some people say it's long overdue. Others are worried it could change our neighborhoods for the worse. Let's tackle this piece first before we dive into the bigger points of the comprehensive plan here. Single family zoning, why does it need to be changed? And what do you say to people who are worried about the changes it might bring?
So, yeah, so single family, first of all, has been a misnomer since the mid 90s when the council at that time passed legislation that allowed for accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
So, for now, this change is it's a change to would be a change to the comprehensive plan and would honestly reflect what actually exists in most neighborhoods right now, which is that we do have, small duplexes, basement apartments, garage apartments. It really reflects the current conditions. Mm-hmm. What it would allow us to do, though, and why I do think it's important, is that it would allow us to begin a conversation about how we expand options for affordability, how we increase the kinds of housing choices that we allow next. So that we can make decisions about how to change our land use code. And as you referenced, that is the conversation that we'll be having in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And I guess I just wanted to look at this larger picture on the comprehensive plan. Seattle's had this urban village strategy for the past several years, focusing on the areas that are able to absorb growth, and then hopefully those areas can capitalize on the growth with jobs and more urban development. Has this policy worked in your estimation? I'm just thinking about all the different concerns you have about social and racial equity here. Has it been working there? Has it made our city more equitable? Your thoughts about where we are right now when it comes to this urban village strategy?
Well, that strategy in particular, no, I don't think it's worked. The initial thought, or what went into that was an attempt to create very small areas next to light rail, next to transit corridors, where we could concentrate density. Yes. The reason that was the strategy was because people didn't want density in the rest of the city, in other neighborhoods. And so I think, the reason this comprehensive plan review, which we do every 5 years as a city, the reason this is so important is because it really is an opportunity for us to look at the deep structural racism that is embedded in the land use code. And it was very intentional. I'm trained as a planner, so, this is part of what we learn in planning school, is that redlining and restrictive covenants and all of the ways in which we told people where they could and could not live are embedded in our land use code. And so we need to think critically about how we build the kind of communities that we want, and do that in a way that is responsive to the harm that has been caused in the past. And, changing the way we think about our neighborhoods is really important. Historically, we have zoned some people out of our community.
That's right.
And this is a chance for us to zone people back in to our neighborhoods, to economic opportunity, to schools, to all of the things that that we all want, that we enjoy in neighborhoods that are more accessible.
Well, and it feels like it's going to be quite a process just to get buy-in from all these different neighborhoods involved here. Seattle's a very diverse place, as you know. Your district, in fact, is one of the most diverse places in the country. But in looking at that, how do you get that buy-in from all those different neighborhoods to reach the goal that you're talking about here when it comes to equity in zoning?
Well, community engagement is a really important part of this. And, that's how you do it. So we need to make sure that our processes are transparent, that there is very deliberate and intentional efforts to get people's input into the options that are available. I was involved, it's not necessarily a land use issue, but I was involved in some of the planning that the community around the potential Graham Street light rail station did a few years ago. And it's a lot of work. But you have to go into communities, bring people to the table, listen to what they want, listen to what their goals and the outcomes that they have, what their vision for their neighborhood is, and then actually incorporate that into the plans that are made. So, we will have a 2-year process. This review plan is due in 2024. Yep. So we've got a couple of years still of looking at what kind of housing options people want, what kind of neighborhood changes they want. And I will say, part of what this is about, changing our built environment so that it is safer for kids, for our elders, for people with mobility or vision impairments,
Mm-hmm.
and more accessible. And
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot about neighborhood character.
Yes.
But what makes neighborhoods enjoyable are all of the things that we like to do, all the amenities that are in them. If you can walk to the deli or walk to a coffee shop or,
Mm-hmm.
go see a healthcare provider, go to
Sure.
the drugstore, everybody deserves access to those things in a way that is safe. And so, I have parents who are aging.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to be able to walk out the door and get some half and half for their coffee,
Sure.
go to see the doctor, go pick up a newspaper, go to the little grocery store to pick up some things. And it's important that people be able to do that safely, and they can't do that if they are only in areas where those amenities are not easily available.
I gotcha. Yeah, my mom's more of a full whipping cream, full fat whipping cream. So thank you for sharing on that piece. I did want to touch on another neighborhood issue here. You've been working with a business improvement area on 15th Avenue East, setting up an area where property owners would pay into the BIA and get a boost in neighborhood projects. With the lingering pandemic affecting businesses, I know new taxes aren't always a popular thing, but I know a lot of businesses have been talking about this in that area. What impact do you think this new BIA is going to have on this part of your district?
Well, so this is the 15th Avenue. So this is actually not in my district.
Just outside, right.
It's in District 3. But you're right. So, the way this works is that the local businesses vote on whether or not to assess themselves. So I just want to be really clear, this isn't a city tax.
Right.
This is an opportunity that's provided in state statute. But that is what happened. Businesses agreed to assess themselves, and they do this so that there is some resources for trash pickup and to host neighborhood events and to do marketing for the businesses that are in the area.
Graffiti cleanup, all sorts of things.
Yeah. So I will say there was some concern from commercial tenants, and it's important to understand that the folks who get to vote in whether or not to do this are the property owners,
right? Not
necessarily the small business tenant who is in a storefront.
Right.
And so that's who we heard from, were the folks who weren't aware that this was happening and weren't consulted or, felt like they were not part of the process.
Right.
And so I did amend the legislation as it came through my committee so that there are at least 2 commercial tenants on the board so that they have some representation and are able to, be part of the conversation about that.
Okay.
And then we also did include an option of using some of the assessment revenue to pay for small business assistance or other programs that might help stop some of the displacement from happening.
Got it. Thank you for that breakdown there. I wanted to give you another question from our mailbag about the Chinatown ID in your district, a public safety question. Here you go. Leaders of the Chinatown International District are having to look at hiring private security with constant damage, theft, verbal, physical assaults, illegal dumping, and corner drug dealers. Where exactly is the council member directing resources so that the community isn't having to pay directly from their pockets? Thank you very much for sending in that question. We've seen a few headlines about this, Councilmember Morales, this issue of possibly hiring private security in the month of September here in the Chinatown ID area. Your response to this?
It's a big problem. And, we have had several conversations with folks in the Chinatown International District. I know that there is a lot of frustration that there has been limited resource available. We do have small business stabilization funds that we have. I think we're on the 4th round now of funding that's gone out. A lot of the funding that we're getting from ARPA. And so, but it's not nearly enough. And it has not been able to go around as much as we would like. So, we are working with the business associations there and trying to understand what we can do. But I know that there is a lot of frustration there, and we continue to try to work with the neighborhood to see how we can provide more resources. And, whether it is the small business stabilization funds or some of the loan programs. I know there are other organizations that are providing small business loans.
Sure.
So there's a lot of work to do for sure.
Yeah, is it a matter of needing more police there, or should private security be brought in? That's a piece of the issue here too, I think.
Well, I don't know that there should be private security. You know, if there is that much of a concern, then it's certainly up to the individual businesses if that's something that they want to do. And part of the challenge there is that there's a lot of security cameras that some of the businesses had posted around, and those aren't working for a number of reasons. So I think this is one of the sort of fallback measures that the folks in the neighborhood are taking.
Yeah, got it. And definitely something that's going to require some more study ahead here. I wanted to check in on one last issue here, if we could try to squeeze this in. What's new for the West Seattle Bridge? I know it has a big impact on, well, West Seattle, I happen to live there, but Georgetown too, and parts of your district. That final phase of repairs we're now hearing is set for November. The project's still on track for completion by the middle of next year. I'm knocking on wood here. So the question is always, can we speed this process up? And I know you've heard that a million times too, but are you confident, just in terms of what you're seeing in committee or whatever else, that we will see the West Seattle Bridge open, the high-rise bridge open in mid-2022?
I think we will. I do want to thank Representative Jayapal, who's been a really strong advocate for Seattle and providing the funding that we needed to get that.
So new federal funding coming in, right?
So yeah, the construction is set to begin in November, as you said. I think there are some activities that will begin next month. And what in terms of Georgetown, what we're really looking at is what's going to happen with the trip levels. So there is a traffic impact. There is an air quality impact on the neighborhood. And people are concerned about, when that's going to stem. So I'm hopeful that things will stay on track, that the process will begin. I think it's going to be a year of repair. I think right now the concern is that, SDOT is encouraging users to reduce their trips during the day. I think particularly eastbound, so kind of coming into downtown. And, I suspect that is going to have more traffic impacts throughout South Park and other parts of, kind of the west side of the Duwamish. So, so the West Seattle Taxi will maintain daytime hours. Instead of going to the winter schedule, they'll stay on their regular schedule. So I think, folks are doing what they can at SDOT to try to prepare for those impacts, and we're all eager to see this wrap up, get started and wrap up, so we can try to minimize the traffic impacts.
Yeah, indeed. That's all the time we have for now. Councilmember Morales, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Good to see you.
Great to see you. And everybody, thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time on Council Edition.